Marcus Jackson steps off the Greyhound bus onto the cracked sidewalk of downtown Philadelphia just after dawn. His black windbreaker carries the faint scent of prison laundry, and in his right hand he clutches a worn leather portfolio containing his diploma in business administration, letters of recommendation from prison reform counselors, and a crisp resume touting internships he completed before his conviction. Each step toward the Amtrak station feels both heavy with hope and laden with doubt. He boards the train for Center City and charts the route to the glass tower offices of Whitmore and Brenner, a leading consulting firm where he once dreamed of working. In the commuter lounge, commuters swipe keycards and tap smartphones. No one looks his way. Marcus smooths the crease in his collared shirt and practices his greeting. "Good morning. I'm here for my 9:30 interview." He breathes in, exhales. Today cannot be the day he's turned away. At 9:15 a.m., he checks in at the reception desk. The young assistant, hair in a tight bun and earbuds dangling, scans his portfolio and blinks. "We don't have an interview scheduled for you," she says, voice polite but final. Marcus offers a copy of his invitation email. She glances at it, then at him. "I'm sorry. This doesn't match any name in our system." Panic flares in his chest. He steps back, nods, and mutters, "Thank you," swallowing the lump in his throat as he turns away. Outside, the November wind bites through his jacket. Marcus ducks into a nearby diner and slides onto a red vinyl stool. He orders black coffee and eggs over easy, then spreads his materials across the Formica table. He rereads his cover letter. Committed professional with a passion for ethical business practice. The words taste hollow. A glance at his phone yields 3 new emails. 2, "Thank you for your application," auto replies, and 1 blunt rejection. "We're pursuing candidates without judicial records. Best of luck elsewhere." Each refusal feels like a physical blow. Marcus stares at the bustling kitchen where cooks call out orders. He remembers the day he graduated, cap and gown in the summer sun, faculty shaking his hand, proud applause from classmates. But that was before the mistake, before the 18 months that became 2 years behind bars for a nonviolent offense. Since his release last week, he's filled out more than 50 applications, navigated background checks, and maintained the positive attitude the halfway house counselor insisted would carry him back to citizenship. Yet, here he is, locked out again. He finishes his coffee and heads back to the street. On a whim, he detours to the corner where a battered food truck parks each morning. Its aroma of spiced lentils and grilled cheese draws him in. The owner, Mr. Gonzalez, a stout man with a thick accent, greets him with a nod. "Back for the special?" he asks. Marcus orders a veggie wrap and offers to help clean up in exchange for a free meal. Gonzalez studies him for a moment, then hands over the wrap with a warm smile. "Thanks," Marcus says, settling at a folding chair. As he wipes down the food prep counter, he overhears a customer complain about those re-entry programs that just churn out recidivists. Marcus's hands freeze. He takes a breath, then quietly replies, "Actually, I just got out last week, and I'm determined not to go back." The customer shifts uncomfortably. Gonzalez slips him an approving nod. Marcus finishes the cleanup, his resolve hardening. That afternoon, back in his tiny halfway house room, Marcus opens a second-hand laptop and pulls up state statutes on employment discrimination. He bookmarks sections on certificate of rehabilitation and ban the box policies. Late into the night, he studies case law, highlighting phrases, unjust barriers to reintegration, public policy favors second chances, employer liability for unjust refusal. By the time he shuts the laptop, he's drafted the opening lines of a new plan, a legal clinic to help ex-offenders challenge discriminatory hiring practices. He leans back, allows himself a small, tired smile. The corporate world may have locked its doors, but Marcus is already scheming how to pick those locks, not with force, but with statutes, precedents, and unyielding determination. Tomorrow he'll walk into that glass tower again, armed not just with a resume, but with the beginnings of a coalition to rewrite the rules that shut him out. On Monday morning, Marcus Jackson arrived at the office of the Community Legal Aid Foundation, tucked into a red brick storefront on Market Street. A battered sign above the door read, Free legal clinic, all welcome. Inside, the walls were lined with donated law books, mismatched desks, and framed thank you letters from clients whose lives had been turned around with a successful appeal or expungement. Marcus paused at the front desk, portfolio in hand, uncertain, until a brisk young woman looked up from her laptop. "Marcus?" she asked, color rising in her cheeks. "We've been expecting you." He blinked in surprise. "You have?" She nodded. "I'm Eliza Moore. We spoke on the phone. Glad you made it." Moments later, Marcus was ushered into a back office where two other attorneys waited: Edward Blake, a seasoned litigator with iron-rimmed glasses, and Sophie Chen, a soft-spoken yet steely former public defender. They rose to greet him, their expressions warm with genuine welcome, not the wary suspicion he'd come to expect. Eliza gestured to a chair. "We reviewed your resume and cover letter. Your legal research in prison, annotating case law, preparing briefs for fellow inmates, was outstanding. We believe your experience could help our clients." Edward tapped a stack of manila folders. "Our clinic is inundated with requests from formerly incarcerated men and women. They face legal obstacles to housing, employment, custody of their children. We could use someone who understands the system from the inside." Sophie added, "And who can bridge the gap between our white-collar legal training and the lived realities of our clients. You've lived this. That gives you authority, empathy, and insight no textbook can teach." Relief and excitement washed over Marcus. His first thought was to thank them. His second was to be wary. Surely this was too good to be true. But their smiles held no condescension, only conviction. They spent the next hour outlining a new initiative, Project Second Chance, a specialized arm of the clinic focused on employment discrimination and re-entry rights. Marcus would serve as a case manager and legal researcher, interviewing clients about their conviction histories, identifying unlawful hiring barriers, and drafting right-to-work appeals under Pennsylvania's Certificate of Rehabilitation statutes. Edward explained, "We'll pair you with one of our attorneys on each case. You'll prepare memos on relevant case law, like Smith v. Commonwealth, and we'll handle court filings." Sophie leaned forward. "Plus, we want you to help us develop a Know Your Rights workshop for halfway house residents. Your voice will carry weight. They'll see you not as a distant lawyer, but as someone who's walked in their shoes." By midday, they'd scheduled his first client interview, a young father seeking reinstatement of his driver's license to regain his warehouse job. They handed Marcus a 3-ring binder of intake forms and a directory of labor law precedents. Eliza smiled as he rose to leave. "Welcome to the team, Marcus. We're in this together." Outside, the sun caught the clinic's dusty windows. Marcus stood for a moment on the sidewalk, absorbing the reality that these 3 white lawyers had seen past his record to his potential. For the first time since his release, he felt his ambition rekindled, not by empty promises, but by genuine partnership. As he walked toward the bus stop, with his portfolio now exchanged for a stack of legal binders, Marcus knew that while corporate America's doors remained closed to him, a new door had swung wide open. Inside that small clinic, he and his allies would begin to dismantle the very barriers that had locked him out. That Tuesday afternoon, Sophie Chen's corner office on the 5th floor of the Community Legal Aid Foundation buzzed with quiet urgency. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's jagged skyline stretched toward a slate-gray sky, while inside, 4 colleagues, Eliza Moore, Edward Blake, Sophie, and Marcus Jackson, gathered around a polished walnut conference table. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and new ink as Sophie tapped open a blank project plan on her laptop. "Let's give this group a name," Sophie said, fingers poised above the keyboard. "Something that embodies purpose and redemption." Edward slid forward a yellow legal pad scrawled with ideas. "How about Project Second Chance?" Eliza and Marcus exchanged approving glances. Marcus nodded. "It captures our mission exactly." With the banner title up on the screen, Project Second Chance, Coalition for Reentry and Employment Equity, they turned to the first order of business, defining their scope. Eliza read aloud from her notes. Employment discrimination. Chain-wide audits of hiring practices that automatically disqualify applicants with convictions, parole and probation support, ensuring returning citizens receive legal assistance to meet supervision requirements and avoid technical violations. Decarceration advocacy. Challenging overcrowding and pursuing alternative sentencing for nonviolent offenders. Marcus leaned in. I've heard too many stories of people losing jobs because a background check algorithm flagged them without context. We need to compile those narratives, real examples that show the human cost. Sophie opened a fresh slide. Collect client stories. And Edward began bulleting steps. Intake interviews, confidentiality protocols, anonymized case summaries for use in reports. Next, Eliza tackled their legal tactics. We'll draft a model ban the box ordinance and approach city council members. Simultaneously, we'll file administrative complaints under Title VII for disparate impact, where policies disproportionately burden formerly incarcerated applicants. She highlighted key precedents, like Greenver's Missouri Pacific Railroad and EEOC guidelines. Marcus jotted down questions about local employer liability and record sealing options. Sophie then proposed enlisting academic partners. We need empirical backing for our policy proposals. If we collaborate with the sociology department, they can provide data on recidivism rates and employment outcomes. Edward smiled. I'll reach out to my contact at Temple University, a professor who studies mass incarceration. He could help us design surveys and statistical analyses. By late afternoon, they had sketched a full project roadmap. Week 1 to 2. Client intake launch. Legal audit framework, drafted week 3 to 4. Employer audits begin. Oral histories recorded. Hotline established. Month 2. Draft ban. The box legislation. Convene expert roundtable with sociologists. Month 3. Public release of second chance report, with case studies and policy recommendations. They also codified their clinic protocols. Every new client would complete a standardized intake form, consent to anonymized storytelling, and be assigned both a volunteer law student and a pro bono attorney. Marcus offered to co-author workshop materials for the halfway house presentations, drawing on his own experiences to build trust with participants. As the light outside dimmed, the four stood and surveyed their work. Digitized slides, handwritten notes, and sticky cards color-coded by priority. Sophie closed her laptop. We've done more in 2 hours than many groups manage in weeks, she said, voice firm with conviction. Eliza gathered the papers and handed Marcus a binder labeled Project Second Chance Phase 1. Ready? She asked. He slid on his coat and took a deep breath. Let's get to work. Together, they stepped out of the office into the bustling hallway, already forging a legal and human-centered campaign to dismantle the barriers that had once locked Marcus, and so many others, out of the American dream. Every Wednesday evening, the fluorescent lights of the Community Legal Aid Foundation's Project Second Chance Clinic flickered to life at 5:30 p.m. sharp. By 6 p.m., the waiting room, rows of folding chairs before a chipped reception desk, was already half full with men and women freshly released from correctional facilities, clutching bus tokens, resumes, and nervous hope. Marcus Jackson arrived early, portfolio in hand and heart pounding with purpose. Eliza Moore greeted him in the reception area. Marcus, your first client is here. She nodded toward a tense young woman, Tamika, seated near the door. Her eyes flickered with apprehension. Marcus offered a warm smile and extended his hand. Hi, Tamika. I'm Marcus. Let's grab your intake form and talk through your situation. They moved into a small interview room, whose walls were lined with patched-together legal textbooks and motivational posters reading Justice for All and Second Chances Welcome. Marcus set Tamika's crisp paperwork on the table and began gently, Tell me about your case and what you need. She recounted how, despite completing her sentence for a low-level theft charge, her employer had rescinded a job offer after a background check flagged her conviction. As Tamika spoke, Marcus took notes, then turned to Sophie Chen and Edward Blake, who joined them moments later. Sophie reviewed the company's hiring policy, nodding sympathetically. Edward scanned statutory language on his laptop. Together, they identified two legal avenues: a misapplication of ban the box, local ordinance, and a potential disparate impact claim under Title VII. By 7 p.m., they had drafted an appeal letter demanding the employer reconsider Tamika's application and threatened an administrative complaint if necessary. Tamika's relief was palpable. She hugged Marcus, tears shining in her eyes. Across the hallway, Eliza led a Know Your Rights workshop for a group of 15 returning citizens. Marcus and a corps of 3 law student volunteers, clad in borrowed blazers, passed out handouts summarizing key employment discrimination protections. One volunteer, Jasmine, spoke about record sealing. You can petition the court after 10 years with no new convictions. The attendees peppered her with questions about costs and timelines. The energy in the room crackled with newfound agency. By 8 p.m., the clinic's small conference room hosted its first pro bono case review session. Marcus and Edward examined blue ribbon binders filled with discovery documents and interrogation transcripts. They discovered that in one high-profile parole revocation hearing, the arresting officer had failed to advise the defendant of his Miranda rights, a clear procedural defect. Edward's eyes gleamed. "We can file a motion to vacate that conviction," he declared. Marcus grinned. A client's life could change with a deft motion rather than a drawn-out trial. As word of Project Second Chance's successes spread, local media began to take notice. A reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer arrived unannounced with camera crew in tow, filming Marcus guiding a client through her appeal letter. The resulting front-page story, "Ex-convict turns legal advocate, clinic dismantles hiring bias," ran the next morning, drawing a queue twice as long at the following week's clinic. By month's end, the clinic had secured 3 workplace reinstatements, 2 license reinstatement orders, and 1 vacated conviction. Volunteers from nearby law schools applied in droves, eager to lend their research skills to the cause. Marcus often paused in the hallway to watch them pore over case files, their earnest faces illuminated by computer screens. When he finally locked the clinic doors at 9 p.m., Marcus felt a surge of pride and possibility. What had begun as one man's determination to clear his own name had blossomed into a beacon of hope for dozens. In that small storefront, amid hand-torn posters and mismatched furniture, they were not merely filling a legal gap, they were rebuilding lives. Each file closed marked a victory over prejudice. Each freed client a testament to what true partnership could achieve. The corporate world had shut its doors, but here, in the Clinic of Hope, Marcus and his white lawyer allies had swung them wide open. The morning sunlight glinted off the columns of the Philadelphia County Courthouse as Marcus Jackson, flanked by Eliza Moore, Edward Blake, and Sophie Chen, stepped through its heavy brass doors. Today was the culmination of months of clinic work, a challenging hearing to overturn the drug possession conviction of Jonathan Reed, a 28-year-old father of 2 who'd spent 18 months behind bars for evidence planted during a traffic stop. The case had drawn local media attention as a test of both police accountability and the clinic's new Second Chance coalition. In the oak-paneled courtroom, Judge Hargrove presided from a raised bench, robes crisp and expressions stern. On the prosecution side, Assistant District Attorney Carla Simmons arranged her file folders, each red tab marking alleged irrefutable evidence. A detective from the narcotics unit sat behind her, arms folded. Marcus and his team set up at the defense table. Sophie with the pre-hearing motions, Edward calibrating his laptop for slides, Eliza passing handouts of police procedure excerpts to the gallery. As the bailiff called the case, Jonathan, wearing a navy suit borrowed from a halfway house mentor, stood stiffly at the defense table. His wife and 2 small children, dressed in their Sunday best, watched from the spectator benches, faces bright with anxiety. Marcus laid a comforting hand on Jonathan's shoulder and whispered, "We're ready." After opening statements, Ada Simmons outlined the state's position. "Your Honor, Jonathan Reed's conviction was supported by the testimony of Officer Martinez, who recovered 0.3 grams of cocaine during a lawful traffic stop. The defense's appeal rests on procedural technicalities, not substantive innocence." She clicked to a slide showing a grainy photo of a crumpled plastic bag on the passenger seat. Sophie rose for the defense's opening. Your Honor, this isn't a mere technicality. Today we prove that the search violated Mr. Reed's Fourth Amendment rights, and that the evidence was tainted by gross misconduct. She handed up a binder of motions. We ask the court to suppress the evidence seized without probable cause, and failing that, to grant a new trial in the interest of justice. The courtroom's hush was palpable as Sophie sat. Judge Hargrove peered over her glasses. Proceed with your first witness. Eliza called Jonathan to the stand. Under oath, he recounted the night of his arrest. The way Officer Martinez approached his car, the abrupt demand to step outside, the blinding flashlight, and the confusion when told contraband had been found. His voice wavered but held steady as he described how the officer refused to let him call his attorney or see a search warrant. Soft gasps rippled through the gallery. Next, Edward called retired police procedure expert Captain Raymond Ellis. In a measured tone, Ellis testified that the stop fell well outside standard protocol. No traffic violation had preceded the search, and the pat-down exceeded the scope of a Terry frisk. Edward displayed training manual excerpts on a courtroom screen, highlighted passages requiring reasonable suspicion and immediate threat, neither of which applied. Captain Ellis concluded, the search was improper. Any evidence recovered must be suppressed. But the prosecution pressed on, calling Officer Martinez to the stand. He insisted he smelled marijuana and acted on reasonable belief. Under rigorous cross-examination by Marcus, who had prepared every question and cited relevant case law, Martinez grew flustered. Marcus asked, Officer, are you aware that Pennsylvania versus Mims prohibits routine vehicle searches absent articulable suspicion? Martinez's eyes darted. I believe the odor constituted probable cause. Marcus pressed further. Did you inform Mr. Reed of his right to refuse the search? Martinez shook his head. No, that isn't required. Marcus seized the moment. So you conducted a non-consensual search without warning, based solely on sniffing an odor. Would you say that procedure aligns with your department's training? Martinez's silence spoke volumes. When the prosecution rested, Sophie delivered a succinct closing. Your Honor, this evidence was obtained by unconstitutional means. The integrity of our justice system depends on excluding such tainted proof. Ada Simmons countered with a plea to uphold convictions for public safety, but her words rang hollow against the day's revelations. Judge Hargrove retired briefly to chambers. When he returned, the courtroom held its breath. He tapped his gavel. I find that the search of Mr. Reed's vehicle was conducted in violation of the Fourth Amendment. The motion to suppress is granted. A stunned silence fell before the defense table erupted in quiet celebration. Next came the judge's ruling on retrial. Given the absence of admissible evidence, the conviction is vacated and charges are dismissed. The gallery exhaled as Jonathan sank to his knees, tears streaming. His wife rushed forward, embracing him as their children cried in relief. In the hallway afterward, reporters swarmed Marcus and his team. A Philadelphia Inquirer journalist pressed for comment. Marcus, voice steady but emotion beneath, said, Justice prevailed today because we refuse to accept excuses for misconduct. Mr. Reed and countless others deserve a second chance. Back in their office, Sophie, Eliza, Edward, and Marcus raised coffee mugs in a quiet toast. To Project Second Chance, Sophie said. To rewriting the rules, Eliza added. Edward nodded. Marcus smiled, thinking of the hundreds still waiting in the clinic's lobby. This is just the beginning, he replied. But today, we opened one more door. 6 months after Jonathan Reed's exoneration, the Second Chance Coalition convened in the stately hearing room of the city's community center, an austere space of polished wood paneling, flags in gleaming stands, and long rows of folding chairs. At the head table sat Marcus Jackson, alongside Eliza Moore, Edward Blake, and Sophie Chen, flanked by a dozen formerly incarcerated clients and a sociologist from Temple University, Dr. Naomi Ellis, whose research on employment and recidivism would underpin their policy proposals. At precisely 10 a.m., Councilmember Rachel Ortiz, sponsor of the proposed Second Chance Employment and Reintegration Act, took the podium. Her opening words set the tone. Today we confront an injustice far too common. Talented citizens locked out of gainful work by a single conviction. Our city, and I hope our nation, must do better. She invited Dr. Ellis to present the coalition's data. Dr. Ellis adjusted her glasses and clicked her remote. A slide appeared showing a graph. Recidivism rates by employment status. Statistics revealed that individuals employed within 6 months of release were 65% less likely to reoffend. The evidence is clear, she said evenly. Stable employment isn't just a personal victory, it's public safety policy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Next, Marcus stepped forward, addressing the heart of their reform. Our bill mandates 3 key measures. First, a ban-the-box provision delaying conviction inquiries until after a conditional offer. Second, a certificate of rehabilitation program streamlining, record sealing for nonviolent offenses. And third, a second chance tax credit, a financial incentive for employers who hire and retain returning citizens for at least 1 year. He paused to let each point land, scanning the gallery of small business owners, HR directors, and social justice advocates. Edward Blake followed with the legal scaffolding. To enforce ban-the-box, we propose administrative penalties for non-compliant employers and a civil right of action for aggrieved applicants. For certificates of rehabilitation, we codify an expedited court process capped at 90 days, with automatic sealing of eligible records. Finally, the tax credit, modeled on existing work opportunity tax credits, provides up to $3,000 per hire, ensuring employers see a tangible benefit from giving second chances. He clicked again. A draft bill text appeared on a large screen, its clear structure applauded by legislative staffers in navy suits. Eliza Moore narrated the human stories behind the statutes. She invited Lisa, a single mother who'd been rehired as a paralegal after the coalition's clinic intervention, to the stand. Lisa's voice trembled as she described walking into her first court-ordered employment hearing, resume in hand, nervous but determined. When my employer saw I'd attended Project Second Chance's Know Your Rights workshop, they offered me a job on the spot, she said. That job saved my family. As Lisa sat down, the room broke into spontaneous applause. Finally, Sophie Chen presented their rollout plan. A citywide re-entry resource center, staffed by coalition members, to guide individuals through applications, court filings, and job search support. She showed a mock-up of the center's website, a portal for workshop registration, legal FAQs, and employer matchmaking. This isn't a one-off law, she concluded. It's an ecosystem of support that turns a legislative victory into lived opportunity. The afternoon hearing invited opposing voices too. A representative from the Chamber of Commerce warned of undue liability and small business burdens, while a state senior official questioned the bill's cost. In rebuttal, Marcus and Dr. Ellis emphasized long-term savings, reduced incarceration costs, increased tax revenues, and stronger communities. Edward pointed out that similar measures in other jurisdictions had generated net positive budgets within 2 years. As the sun dipped low, Councilmember Ortiz closed the session. I move that this bill pass unanimously out of committee. The clerk called the roll. 5 in favor, 1 abstention, none opposed. A cheer rose as the gavel fell. Marcus exhaled, feeling the weight of every locked door begin to lift. That evening, the coalition gathered around Sophie's dining table. Pizza from Tony's, battered but beloved by all. Glasses clinked as they toasted. Rachel's final words echoed, "Today, we didn't just draft a bill. We forged a path for everyone labeled unemployable to walk it." Marcus looked around at his allies, white lawyers who had trusted his insight, clients who had shared their pain, experts who had backed their cause. In that moment, he knew the real work was just beginning, transforming legislative text into tangible change on every factory floor, office suite, and shop counter in the city. But for the first time, he was certain they had the blueprint and the coalition to see it through. Spring's first warm breeze rippled through the Capitol lawn as President Marianne Caldwell stepped to the lectern beneath a banner declaring Second Chance Employment and Reintegration Act signing ceremony. Behind her, Marcus Jackson, Eliza Moore, Edward Blake, Sophie Chen, and dozens of formerly incarcerated colleagues stood in the front row, faces alight with anticipation. Hundreds of advocates, employers, and re-entry program graduates filled the bleachers, their applause echoing against marble facades. The president cleared her throat. "Today we turn the page on a legacy of exclusion," she began, her voice resonant. "By signing this act, we affirm that one mistake should never condemn a person to a lifetime on society's margins." She invoked Jonathan Reed's exoneration, Lisa's paralegal reinstatement, and the hundreds whose lives had been transformed by Project Second Chance, proclaiming their stories emblematic of America's capacity for redemption. With a flourish, she inked her pen across the signature line. A collective cheer rose. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he joined her at the podium. For a moment, the world narrowed to the gleaming silver pen and the crisp paper beneath it. Then, the act was law. Within days, federal agencies issued guidance to align their hiring policies. All executive branch job applications would hide conviction questions until after conditional offers, and human resources departments nationwide began training on the new ban the box requirements. Flashy news bulletins chronicled early adopters, a Silicon Valley startup boasting a 20% ex-offender workforce, a regional grocery chain hiring dozens of applicants whose backgrounds once barred them from employment. Back in Philadelphia, Marcus returned to the community center to witness the first re-entry resource hub open its doors. The converted storefront buzzed with activity. Computers displayed online job boards, pre-filtered to exclude disqualifying algorithms. A bulletin board showcased Certificate of Rehabilitation milestones, and a classroom corner awaited the next Know Your Rights workshop. Hundreds of former clients streamed in, some clutching newly sealed records, others clutching pay stubs from their first post-act jobs. Eliza, now named the Hub's Executive Director of Employer Outreach, guided a group of HR professionals through a compliance seminar. Edward moderated a live webinar on filing administrative complaints. Sophie led a practicum on drafting tax credit applications for small business owners. And Marcus, lauded now as a community organizer and legal strategist, mentored a cohort of 10 new Second Chance ambassadors, formerly incarcerated leaders trained to speak, advocate, and lead workshops of their own. On Capitol Hill, Councilmember Rachel Ortiz and her Senate co-sponsors celebrated the bill's bicameral adoption by convening a re-entry success summit. Panel discussions featured CEOs describing productivity gains from inclusive hiring, judges recounting smoother probation outcomes for employed clients, and sociologists presenting early data. A 30% drop in recidivism among participants in certified reentry programs. Newspapers carried front-page headlines. From cell to CEO, the new face of corporate America. Redemption pays. Tax credit employers prosper. 1 year after the signing, Marcus received an unexpected invitation to join the White House Council on Re-entry and Fair Chance Hiring. As its first senior advisor, an appointment that eclipsed even his loftiest pre-incarceration dreams, he traveled regularly to Washington, D.C. to help shape national policy, mentor state legislatures drafting companion bills, and ensure that rural and urban communities alike reaped the law's benefits. Yet even amid these high-level duties, Marcus remained grounded in the neighborhood where his journey had begun. On a crisp Saturday morning, he returned to the gymnasium at the community center, now repurposed as a second chance job fair. Dozens of booths lined folding tables, manufacturers, tech firms, healthcare providers, all proudly displaying Fair Chance Employer placards. Marcus greeted each attendee by name, recalled their cases, and shared in their triumphs as they received job offers on the spot. As the day wound down, he paused in the sunlit hallway and watched a new client, a former Marine turned youth mentor, shake hands with a small business owner who'd just applied for the tax credit to hire him. In that handshake, Marcus saw the culmination of every legal brief he'd drafted, every coalition meeting he'd led, and every barrier he'd helped dismantle. The doors that once shut him out now opened for hundreds more, forging pathways from uncertainty to opportunity. Marcus smiled, knowing that while the fight for justice never truly ends today, at least, fairness had won.